students of Ghana Christian International High School, and we urge you all to subscribe to His Gov TV. Thank you.
Hello there, you're welcome to His Gov TV. Over here, we are more into the study of history and government as a subject. Quite recently, we also added some other subjects to it, like English, social studies, and CRS or Christian religious studies as well. So if you like any of these contents, kindly hit on the subscribe button for us. And those who have already subscribed, we thank you very much for your support as well. So in our previous lesson, we looked at the problems of the Organization of African Unity. Even though we said that the organization faced many problems, many challenges, such as a lack of fund, colonial heritage of some of the member states, and other problems that the organization faced. And so, should in case you missed that lesson, I'll include the link at the end of the video. So at the end of the video, you'll see a thumbnail will appear, and then you can click on it to check on that previous lesson that is on the problems of the OAU. Also, I may add the link in the RPK. I'll title it RPK, the relevant previous knowledge, in the description under this video, so you can also click on that and have access to that video, the problems. So today we are looking at the achievements. So today we are not looking at problems, we are looking at the achievements of the Organization of African Unity, that's the OAU. So despite the problems that we discussed in our previous lesson, the OAU chalked some achievements that is worthy to be talked about. So they were able to achieve certain things, even though we have said that the main aim of the main aim for the formation of the organization was defeated right at the onset, and that was the political unity of the African states or the member states. Of course, that notwithstanding, the OAU has made some strides in their activities, and so today we are going to look at some of the achievements that the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, has been able to achieve so far since 1963, when it was first founded. So let's look at our lesson objectives for today. So our lesson objectives for today is quite simple. That by the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss the achievements, okay, of the OAU. You could be asked in your final exams to discuss some of the achievements of the OAU, because a lot of people, say that the OAU has failed, mainly because it was not able to achieve its intended purposes. But I beg to differ that today, after this lesson, you would really come to appreciate the work of the OAU, and that you will know that they are really doing the right thing, and we hope that it continues. So let's look at the first point for discussion. So one of the major achievements of the Organization of African Unity was the settlement of border disputes. You recall in our previous lesson the problems that the OAU faced. We discussed that one of the problems that the OAU faced was that of border disputes, where they had border disputes between Nigeria and Cameroon, Algeria and Morocco, and other member states. And this, I said, was a very big problem to the organization, because these member states are looking forward to unite politically and become one country. And then here we are, the same members who are seeking to unite are having issues with border. And so it was somehow ironical. But then the OAU stepped in some of the border issues. Okay, not all, but some of them were able to were able to be settled by the OAU. So examples of such settled border disputes included that of the Algeria-Morocco border conflict, as well as the Ethiopia-Somalia border conflict, Ethiopia-Eritrea border conflict, and then Nigeria and Cameroon. These disputes notwithstanding, or these settlements notwithstanding, there are still more for the OAU to do, because still many African countries are still, or many member states, I should say, are still engulfed in this whole border disputes issue. And I set an example the last time about Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, about the sea, whatever issues, So these issues are still there. They are still pertaining. They are still, in there. So, but then we can commend the OAU for being able to solve some of these issues that popped up. But then there is still more to do, more of these issues in Africa, and I know that the leaders of the OAU are going to take a closer look at some of these issues and bring them to an end. So let's look at another achievement of the OAU. So the next achievement of the OAU was that of decolonization. Okay, decolonization, that is helping many of the African countries to gain independence. That is one of the major achievements of the OAU, decolonizing the African continent, because with the exception of Ethiopia and Sierra Leone, and I think Liberia, all the other African states were under colonial rule. And so when Ghana, for instance, gained independence, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah invited, somewhere in 1958, invited most of the freedom fighters in the other African states to Accra for a conference, and he pledged, Ghana pledged to support these freedom fighters in their countries. And there were even at times where some of these freedom fighters were trained in Ghana to go into their various countries to fight for independence. And so gradually, the activities of Nkrumah through the OAU really, led to quite a number of African countries gaining their independence from colonial rule. So as of now, the whole of the African continent has successfully been liberated from colonial rule. And the organization, as I said, played a very critical role in the attainment of independence in countries like Zimbabwe, Angola, South Africa, Namibia, and Cape Verde. In South Africa, for instance, with the apartheid system, there was a time that the OAU refused to attend an Olympic game because of the fact that all these were geared towards putting pressure on the South African apartheid government or regime to grant independence or to abolish the apartheid system. Okay, and so you realize that at a point the OAU isolated South Africa from its activities, and all these measures put in place by the OAU, helped some of these African countries to gain their independence. And today, a lot of the African continent, all the member states are free on the African continent. And indeed, don't also forget that Ghana's first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who said that the independence of Ghana was meaningless until it was linked with the total liberation of the African continent. So he felt that without the other African countries gaining their independence, then the independence of Ghana was going to be meaningless. And so in that regard, he did so many things that later his own people, his own countrymen will come to accuse him of using the country's resources for selfish gains. But that is just a topic for another time. So let's move on to the next achievement of the OAU. Now, the OAU has also been able to create awareness, all right? So the creation of awareness. The organization has been able to create awareness, okay, among African leaders on the need to seek African solutions to African problems instead of relying on external and foreign solutions to African problems. So there has been some form of awareness on the African continent, not even among the African leaders alone, but even the citizenry, the African, the ordinary African, has come to appreciate the need for the African country or the African states or countries to come together, and unite and form one continental government. All right. So that awareness has been there, mostly through education, as we are doing today. And so a lot of people have come to appreciate, and that is the awareness that we are talking about, that Africans should seek for their own solutions. Very often when there is issues in Africa, you realize that some African countries run to their former colonial masters asking for help. And always these former colonial masters tend to interfere in the politics of that country. And so the the OAU is trying as much as possible to create that awareness that whatever is confronting Africa, we should have a solution here. We have the solution here, and it should be here instead of always inviting our former colonial masters into our affairs. And this will of course, this reminds me of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's a popular saying that the African or the black man is capable of managing its own affairs. And so that is another achievement that I believe is also very, very important for the Organization of African Unity. Now, another achievement of the OAU is the maintenance of peace on the African continent, even though there is somehow relative peace, because the African country, even as of today, is not peaceful. Some countries or some member states are still engaged in war. Others are still engaged in coup d'etats here and there. And so, but then at a point in time when the OAU was able to bring about peace to many war-torn countries, okay, through its peacekeeping activities in countries like Rwanda during the genocide era. I believe that the OAU was in there to keep the peace, even though there are so many stories, of course, surrounding the peacekeeping in Rwanda. Again, in Liberia, during the civil war of Samuel Doe and Charles Taylor, in those days, good. So the OAU also played a very important role by sending troops to guide to keep the peace in Liberia. Again, the Sierra Leonean civil war, also the OAU were also there to send troops to keep peace. And then the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, in the course of their civil war, the OAU was again there to keep the peace. So in all these war-torn countries, we know the stories behind some of these countries. They have really been hit hard by war, and so the OAU was in there to keep peace. And today, some of these countries, Rwanda, for instance, is very, very, very peaceful. Liberia is very peaceful. Sierra Leone is very peaceful. DRC, it's also very peaceful. So the OAU is doing a lot, and all these are in line with the objective of trying to bring the African country together and unite them. Good. So let's look at the last two. No, I don't think this is the last two. The last two will come later. Another achievement of the OAU has to do with the promotion of the African culture. And this is very necessary because of the fact that many African countries, you know how the Europeans branded the culture, the way of life of the African people. And even if you go to abroad, there are some books, some schools that still teach that African culture, is backward. And so it is really important that the OAU do something, in order to promote the African culture. And that has to do with the promotion of the African culture in line with what has been said by the Europeans, or the wrong perception out there that Africans are barbarians and that their culture and everything are barbaric. So in view of that, the OAU has set up some cultural festivals, okay, such as the All African Cultural Festivals in Algiers. And this took place in Algeria somewhere in 1969. And also the Black Festival of Art and Culture in Lagos also took place in 1977. And then the Pan-African Cultural Festival, which is known as the PANAFest, as well as other sporting events such as All African Games. Now, all these activities, festivals, are aimed at displaying the African culture with the aim of promoting and making it attractive to the outside world, or even to people within the African continent, because a lot of people, because of colonization, because of brainwashing, because of colonial education, even most Africans don't feel proud about their own culture, their own way of life. Okay, and so all these festivals were put in place by the OAU in a bid to promote the culture of the African people. And I believe strongly that this was a good initiative. And I think quite recently I've been seeing some festivals being held in other countries, African cultural festivals held in other countries like Spain. And one thing we should know is that most of these European countries have they have a way of spreading their culture. Even let me tell you something. The French, for instance, they did not colonize Ghana, okay? But you can see that when you look at the French embassy, the ambassador, and if you follow her critically, if you follow her activities, you can see that all that she's trying to do is to promote the French culture, which is not that common in Ghana. And that is all what most of these ambassadors are there to do, to promote their culture. So you see them sponsoring events, organizing French cultural events here and there. So it is very, very important, and it is very, very good that the African culture be promoted. And I think I am very much happy that the OAU is trying to do that. Let's look at the last two, then we'll bring our discussions to an end. The Organization of African Unity also has been able to establish the African Development Bank. And this over here, as you can see, is the headquarters of the African Development Bank. Okay, it is found in Abidjan, that's Cote d'Ivoire. Now, the OAU rendered assistance in the establishment of African Development Bank, which is responsible for the provision of economic aid to member states. So this bank was supposed to work like that of the IMF or the World Bank, but specifically, this bank was established by the OAU for the African country, for the member states. Therefore, if any member states goes into any kind of economic crisis, this African bank should be there to provide economic aid, and that will be a way of elevating poverty from the member states. Now, the ADB, a creation of the OAU, is based in Abidjan. As I said, they provide soft loans to member countries as well as technical assistance and advice on the economic development issues. So, even though this bank is still in existence, I doubt, because of the fact that many African countries still run to the IMF. I mean, currently, as I'm talking to you, my country, Ghana, is sitting at the table with the IMF, and the government is trying to do something called debt restructure, and the government is thinking of using pension funds in exchange for that debt restructure. It's just serious, it's just serious. So Well, even though when you go back to history, some of the African Development Bank has been able to support a lot of member countries, but for me, I doubt that. Yes, it is an achievement because even alone for them to be able to establish and have that mindset alone is something that I think we should commend the OAU for. But I'm hoping that the African Development Bank will really play a very, very critical role, like that of the IMF and the World Bank does in many African countries or in many member states, because I don't really see their impact. So that is the headquarters over there. So let's look at the next one. And this is quite a recent development. The creation of AFTA. Okay, and the AFTA, the full meaning is African Continental Free Trade Area. And this is the headquarters of the AFTA, and this is the sign. And this headquarters is found in Ghana. It was opened in 2018. Yeah, it was opened in 2018 by the current president Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. This is the secretariat of AFTA. Now, what is this AFTA all about? The AFTA is to create a common African market by 2063. I don't know how many of us will be alive by then, but I'm sure that you and I will be alive by 2063. So the AFTA is to create a common African market. And as I said, it was founded in 2018 with its quarters in Accra. Now, the AFTA is to have a common market in Africa where people or the Africans could move in and out of one country to another to sell whatever that they want to sell, being it legitimate, and to also remove all forms of trade barrier. More so, I think the HAFTA is also there to also ensure that Africans trade among themselves, so that the money remains in Africa. Because as it stands now today, a lot of African countries trade with the Europeans more than with themselves. They have more contracts with European countries and Latin American countries more than with their African counterparts. And so this is what the AFTA is about. Now, when this happens, or when this is being realized, you see that it would elevate some sort of poverty from the African continent. All right? Yes, because now money is going to remain on the continent, and I'm even pretty sure that it would also strengthen some of the currency. Now, for this to happen, I'm sure that there should be a common currency for the African market, so that it shouldn't be that when you travel to a different country, you have to change. So, and I think all these recommendations are on the table of the Secretariat or of the the OAU. Okay, and I think they are working towards that. So that is that. That is that. I think we've brought our discussions to an end. But before we go, let me say that you can see that most of the achievements that we have talked about here is almost moving towards the original intention or purpose of the Organization of African Unity. You recall I told you that Nkrumah in his book African Must Unite, stated that Africa was going to have one economic policy, one currency, and all of that. And I believe that that is exactly what the leaders or the present leaders are doing. They are trying to move towards that direction, even though it looks as if the political unity is somehow difficult, but they are trying economic wise to see how best they can unite the whole African continent based on a single common market. So I think they are moving towards that, and the leaders should be commended for that initiative. Good. So we've had a very interesting discussions today. Try your hand on this work for us, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to share. Don't forget to like. Have a nice day. We'll see you some other time. Bye bye.